Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton and Tony Sakalis back again. Another recap, the final recap of the regular season. And it's a good one, Tony. We don't have to talk about any heartbreak like we did after Alabama's loss to Oklahoma, because the Crimson Tide have won the Iron Bowl. Alabama 28, Auburn 14. Alabama has won 5 straight Iron Bowls. This great senior class goes out undefeated in the Iron Bowl. Kalen DeBoer wins his first Iron Bowl, something, of course, Nick Saban and Paul Bryant both were unable to accomplish in their time at Alabama. And, of course, the Tide finishes unbeaten at home. Yet I know there's still some doom and gloom with how the season went, but a really nice note to end things on, Tony. And we're going to talk about some of the college football playoff stuff and what might come next for Alabama at the end. But just in the context of this being a big win, from a morale standpoint, a legacy standpoint for people like Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe, these seniors who I mentioned have now gone undefeated against Auburn. Just how big is having this victory as just a great way to end your regular season with obviously still some possible playoff hopes, like I said, that we'll get into.
Yeah, we'll start off too. Malachi Moore, the first ever Alabama player to play in and win 5 Iron Bowls. A little quirk from today's from the COVID year. But that's, a big achievement for him. For a Trustville kid like him, that means a lot. If it means a lot for a lot of these seniors now, that even the ones that redshirted their whole time at Alabama now have gone and never lost to Auburn. That's going to be something that they can tell their grandkids. It's a really nice bragging right that they'll have for the rest of their lives. And but also the kids that came in from out of state, like Jalen Milroe, I think, cements his legacy at Alabama. He won both of his Iron Bowls. He obviously has that gravedigger play from last year. You can kind of look at this Iron Bowl for him multiple ways. He did have the 3 turnovers, but he did have the 3 touchdowns as well. So it was a mixed bag from him. But I think more or less he's kind of cemented his mark in the legacy, going 2-0 and being a hero in both games. So, and then, you mentioned it for Kalen DeBoer. What a season altering win. I mean, like it could have swayed either way. Look, we'll get into the playoff later, but at the very least, Alabama's 9-3. That's a respectable first year record. Kalen DeBoer, I don't know if you mentioned it in the intro, tied Alabama's single season record for most wins by a first year coach. So that's big. Him and Frank Thomas are the only two coaches to do that. Pretty sure, I forget the year, but it was 9-1 for Thomas. I think you look at it, Kalen said that, he would obviously like to have a few of these games back, and I'm sure he wanted more than 9 wins, but a 9-3 season is not a bad season. And then getting that win over Auburn was so vital, because I think if you go 8-4 and you lose to Auburn and you miss a chance to, like I said, we'll get to the playoffs later, but you miss a chance to backdoor when, everything was kind of put on a plate for you, that'd be hard to forgive. And, he did lose the 3rd Saturday in October. I think you can't get away with losing both of those in your first year with the roster he had. I think it's fine if he was to lose one of them. It's never fine to lose to either of those 2 teams, but I think it's somewhat a little bit forgivable, especially to this Tennessee team at Tennessee. This is a playoff team. But I think he needed this win over Auburn. It was a big deal that he got it. He did get it. And so I think that's going to build a lot of momentum, and it's something that at least he can hang his hat on.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, we said this in the preview show as well, but no matter what happens for Alabama postseason, it just builds some nice offseason momentum too. I mean, shoot, you're listening to this on Monday. We've got the start of, we're getting real close to signing day. There's going to be the transfer portal. There's all these different things. And there's just, a kind of morale shift almost that can kind of happen, with a win like this. And again, like you said, you beat your arch rival, you tied the season record for wins. It's a nice way to wrap up the regular season, I think. So you're spot on there, I think, with some of the legacy standpoint stuff. Let's get into how Alabama did it. And we'll go back to the man you talked about at quarterback, Jalen Milroe. Because, man, I mean, he sure, in the result column made up for what happened against Oklahoma. But, he sometimes made it a little bit hard on himself in Alabama offensively. Of course, he had the 3 turnovers, the 1 interception, 2 fumbles lost, but still was 18 for 24, 256 yards. More importantly, as has been the theme this season. 17 for 104 on the ground, 3 touchdowns. He's up to 20 touchdowns. First time an SEC quarterback has done that in a single season since Johnny Manziel, I believe. So 20 touchdowns on the ground. He reaches for the year. What did you think of Jalen's performance and just how he looked, and maybe what went differently for him that went better, turnovers aside, than did against Oklahoma?
He certainly wasn't boxed up by DeMarcus Riddick. That was like as Riddick projected. And if Riddick's faster than Jalen Milroe, then he certainly didn't show it on the field. So that trash talk kind of backfired for him. I think they were able to kind of implement the running game a little bit more. I think it can kind of control things and open up the offense through there. I think a lot of it too is just Jalen's more athletic than these Auburn defenders, and he was able to, kind of just beat them with athleticism. I thought it was a decent game plan. If you look at what Jalen Milroe did through the air, it wasn't that bad. He did throw that interception, and it wasn't a good pass, but he was 18 of 24 for 256 yards. So they were also moving things through the air a lot more. I don't think. Let's look at the numbers. How many times did Auburn get after Jalen? It doesn't seem like they got the pressure that I was maybe expecting them to get. It looks like, one quarterback hurry and one quarterback sack. So I think that also contributed. He didn't get him flustered. That's the big key with Jalen, is if you can get him flustered, he'll make mistakes. And if you look, I think one of his fumbles was on that strip sack, which really, I mean, you kind of can't blame him as much for that. He kind of was blindsided by that, and obviously fumbled. Didn't really stand much of a chance on that play. So I think some of it was just that they gave him more time, and he does a lot better when you give him time. And it was a more complete offense. They didn't make a ton of like big plays through the air. I guess they did. They were decent through the air. It wasn't the most dynamic game through the air, but if you look at it, 256 passing yards, 201 rushing yards, it's pretty balanced attack. And so that's kind of like what you want to see. And I think when that happens, that's when things open up for Jalen and he's able to exploit. And so if you look at it, they kind of bottled up, maybe Jalen, but, Alabama's offense didn't really get totally clicking until the, opening part of the third quarter. That's when they kind of broke the game open. But this is kind of the game plan for Alabama. If they can get this going, if they get into the playoffs, or kind of depending on what happens in the bowl game. But this is kind of like what you want to see, at least in terms of getting Jalen into the game. Sans the turnovers, if we didn't have those turnovers, I think these numbers could have been even better.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I thought, to go back to what you said, where it really got clicking in the second half, I thought that first drive where you come out of halftime and, going into halftime, it was like, okay, defense kind of bailed you out after some errors a little bit. You're winning, but, it's a one-score game. Who knows maybe what can happen if you don't take advantage. And then they got the ball. They marched methodically down the field, didn't have a negative play on their first drive of the second half. And that, like you said, really set the tone. And I thought Jalen looked good on that drive. I thought running the ball, he was better. I remember after the Oklahoma game, Nick Sheridan said he was, just kind of running a little bit too laterally, not going north to south enough, and just not being efficient with his runs to the outside. I thought those looked a lot better. And then just passing, I think really over the last 2 games, I know Oklahoma is going to be a forgettable performance, but early in that game, and then I think pretty much all game long against Auburn, he's just been kind of hitting some of these throws over the middle. Alabama got stuck in 3rd and long a lot, which obviously isn't great. You want to get those positive plays to not set up those 3rd and longs. But Jalen Milroe got them out of a few plays with some just kind of calm reads, hit the open guy. And I think it was pretty promising against another, good defense that could have forced you into a lot, more bad situations in addition to the turnovers. I thought he made some nice throws, particularly over the middle, just to get him out of some 3rd and long, some 3rd and mediums.
Yeah. And then Germie Bernard had a big game, kind of helped him out. There are times when, once again, when Jalen's not pressured, I think, you see some of that maturity and kind of growth in the passing game. We talk about Jalen's we talk about him on those intermediate throws and how he's not usually good on those intermediate throws. He's 3 of 3 for 64 yards. against Auburn on those 10 to 19 yard throws, according to Pro Football Focus. Interestingly enough, it was the deep balls, the ones that he's normally good at, that he had his troubles with. He was 1 of 5 with his interception on passes that went 20 or more yards past the line of scrimmage. He was kind of eating up those short and, behind the line of scrimmage throws where he was 14 of 15 for 167 yards on balls that went 9 yards or less through the air. It sounds easy to just, say, oh, those are easy passes, but you got to find them, you got to make them, you got to deliver them. So credit to him for those short passes. And then also, he was good with the 3 intermediate balls. Those intermediate balls are probably the toughest throws you have to make because you're kind of throwing into the defense. So he did a good job with those. It was a steady game. There were some mistakes as a passer, but I thought for the most part he was good as a passer, and that, like I said, it opened it up for him as a runner as well.
Absolutely. And you talk about one guy that helped in that department, and that's kind of another key to the win here, Tony, for Alabama. Germie Bernard, him and Jam Miller, I kind of want to lump them two together because those two were absolute difference makers from a skill player's standpoint on Saturday. Bernard, like you said, 7 catches, 111 yards, a season high for him. Just always seemed like he was Jalen Milroe's outlet. Like you said, even on some of those shorter throws, he's able to get a lot of yards after the catch. Then Jam Miller, 28 carries. They finally seemed like lifted the manhole cover on whatever limit Jam Miller was on with his carries. 28 carries, a season high, 84 yards, did not score, but it was actually a little hard done by to not do that. On Justice Haynes' 2-yard touchdown, Jam Miller had every single rush on that entire drive besides the one that ended up at the end zone. So
that was like the first or second drive of the third quarter?
That was the really efficient one.
Was it the first or second drive?
The first one. That was the
crazy
right.
So Jam did a really good job on that drive, and like you said, you kind of like saw the offense kind of start clicking at that point. So I mean, the numbers on paper for Jam aren't superb. 28 rushing yards and not getting 100 yards is not really what you would expect. If you would have told me that Jam Miller got 28 carries, I think that I would have expected more than whatever 80. What did he have? What did you say he had?
84 yards.
84 yards. Yeah, he had 13 yard, or he had a 14-yard run, but most of his yards were kind of short, and he was kind of like moving, like you said, efficient. He wasn't. I don't think he had very many when he lost yards. It's just kind of like moved the pile forward. And this Auburn team is not an easy team to run against. So I mean, those are 84 hard-nosed yards. It's not against a cheap team that has a porous run defense. And then Germie Bernard, man, that guy, this was his best game. 7 catches, 5 of those came on third down. 3 of those were 20 or more yards. He was picking up first downs. He was helping Jalen in that intermediate passing game. He could make yards after the catch. I didn't have his yards after the catch stats. Let's see what that was.
49.
49 yards after the catch. I mean, yeah, that's a great day. That's a really good day for him. So I think that's what Alabama got him for, is games like this where he could kind of be that. I think that's what we all thought he was going to be, that number one guy. He certainly played like a number one receiver against Auburn. So that was big. And so it was good, talk about people that I don't know if this will be his only Iron Bowl. We were kind of talking about that before the show, or if he'll come back next year, but made a really good first Iron Bowl impression. Saturday.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And that will be, some of our pods now, we turn our attention to, the what ifs of the roster. That's, a future discussion. But yeah, I thought he was excellent. And, to kind of go back to Jam, and I agree with all the stuff you said. I mean, I feel like we have had these conversations so much this season where, especially with the running backs, we see this kind of balanced performance. Jalen has a good game on the ground, and you're still able to give Jam almost 30 carries. And then, almost the next game or a couple of games down the road, it seems like that plan sort of gets abandoned. I mean, this to me feels like something you have to stick with now in the postseason.
Yeah, it's harder to do when, teams can make you more one-dimensional if they're able to disrupt Jalen. Like, I think it all comes down to they weren't able to really disrupt Jalen enough and change the offense. Yeah, like I said, this is the plan for Alabama. This is what they would like to do. Alabama would have liked to do this against Tennessee. They would have liked to do this against Oklahoma. It just didn't work out that way. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any question with what you said. You do kind of want to go to this. I do like that they did more traditional runs, and I think that might be something they focus. But a lot of that goes hand in hand with, like, is the defense going to allow for that? Or are they going to be in a situation where, does Alabama's defense allow for that? Because can it, get off the field, and can it, kind of create that flexibility? Can you get that complete game? Or are you playing from behind like you were against Oklahoma, and you need to strike fast and you're going to become a passing team? Like the way that they fell behind against Oklahoma and the way Oklahoma was taking, time off the clock, you really can't devote a running game like they did against Auburn. So it's there's a lot of variables, but sure. I mean, that's, in its ideal game plan, I think that's kind of what things look like. Once again, minus those turnovers. It's crazy that, Alabama had 4 turnovers on the day. You had the 3 from Jalen, and also Ryan Williams fumbled as well. It's crazy they were still able to win so comfortably with 4 turnovers. 4 turnovers in an Iron Bowl is usually a death blow. That's usually we're starting to talk about how Auburn came in and upsetted them and ended the season. It would all revolve around those 4 turnovers. Just Auburn was terrible on offense, and really credit to Alabama's defense for just disrupting things. Auburn really couldn't go anywhere, and that's what made things possible. And you would really have expected this Auburn offense to take advantage of some of Alabama's mistakes, but that was not the case, at least.
Well, yeah, and that's the perfect segue, because it is wild that you don't talk about the 4 turnovers as much as you think you would in a game like this with a rivalry like this. But that is credit, like you just said, to Alabama's defense. And I think, that's a good segue. I want to shout out a few players here, specifically, Tony, and then get your thoughts on just what the defense was doing well to slow Auburn down. Obviously, you mentioned the 4 turnovers, but they absolutely walled up. Malachi Moore, we talked about him at the top, absolutely was playing with the energy of a guy who knows this is his last Iron Bowl and wanted to get that record of going 5 for 5 personally. 4 tackles. He had a half tackle for a loss, 3 pass breakups, had an absolutely huge hit on, I forget the Auburn receiver's name, but prevented a first down that led to a missed field goal. Bray Hubbard, 4 tackles, had an interception as well. He has 3 now since coming into the starting lineup, and I believe that leads the team. Damani Jackson,
not being a starter from the start,
coming in and doing a good job there. Damani Jackson, as well in the secondary, 8 tackles, 2 pass breakups. Jahad Campbell doing his thing, led the team, 9 tackles, 1 for loss, 2 quarterback hits. Before we get into how they stopped Auburn, Tony, I mean, just, what did you see, I guess, from some of those guys, and just how it kind of all came together for the defense, when it really needed to, like you mentioned, they had to go back on the field a lot in unexpected fashion after dealing with 4 turnovers.
Yeah, and you know what? Credit to I really like Jahad Campbell in this game. Coming in, the 3rd and goal stop where he just came in and blew up the run and forced the 4th down that Auburn eventually tried to go for, but then had a false start and then ended up kicking a field goal. I thought Jahad Campbell was really great, especially when you consider that he was playing, without his normal deputy and Deontay Lawson next to him. And then another person, I'm not sure we mentioned it, but Justin Jefferson, I thought had a really good game filling in for Lawson. Alabama at the beginning of the season talked about having 3 starters at inside linebacker. And, I think Justin Jefferson really proved that he came in and really put in a starting performance, 6 tackles, half for a loss, but just did a good job of, stepping in for an injured Lawson. And you look at the job Alabama did in the running game. I mean, Jarquez Hunter was the best running back in the SEC heading into this one. They limited him to 56 yards on 13 carries, just really kind of took him out of the game. He had a 21-yard run. Outside of that, you take that out, it's 12 carries for 35 yards outside of that one run. That's pretty efficient for stopping a guy like Jarquez Hunter, especially with how hot he was running the ball. Now Peyton Thorne made a few plays with his legs. Kind of expected that. I said that at the beginning when I was saying that Auburn could be a tough team to beat for Alabama. Just you had a mobile quarterback in Thorne. Thorne went 24 of 41 for 301 with a touchdown and an interception. Like those are good enough numbers, I guess, to win. The 59% completion rating is not great. I mean, like Alabama's defense really should have been hurt a lot more though, because they were put in some tough spots. Because you come in and the offense gets a turnover, the offense gets 4 turnovers. You get put in a tough spot. So credit for Alabama's defense for maybe bending and not breaking sometimes, or just answering the bell. I always can consider it too. When you look at it, it's almost like I compare it to a pitcher, right? So sometimes you're putting to. Not all pitches are the same when you're a pitcher. If you're pitching with a lot of guys on base, those are going to take more strain. With the defense, coming in off of a turnover, coming in on unexpected times, I think that puts a lot more strain on the defense. And I thought Alabama did a good job of, kind of disregarding that, playing past that, and really answering the bell. I think I gave the defense an A-, and maybe they should have even gotten an A. I thought they did a really good job. Just kind of stopping Auburn. This really could have been a game where you start to see the defense break after Alabama turns the ball over so many times, and then you can start to see we've seen it in Iron Bowls where things can kind of snowball for Alabama, and I think the defense really prevented that from happening, and that was really big.
Yeah, they were absolutely huge. I think the main point that you made is just how well they stopped Jarquez Hunter. His 56 yards was his 3rd lowest total in a game this season. That felt huge. We didn't see them have the same kind of success against a Dylan Sampson, very much a running back of his caliber. You mentioned the Jahad Campbell 3rd down stop. I saw Kane Womack sprint out onto the field and was just getting psyched with his guys. They clearly just relish those goal line stops. And man, when it's humming, I mean, this is a super, super hard team to break through for an albeit inconsistent at times Auburn offense. But yeah, I mean, this team just bucks up when their back's against the wall.
And just what a season Jahad's had. I mean, he's a guy that I think at the beginning of the year, you all thought, we all thought that, Deontay Lawson was going to be the main guy, on this defense. He was the captain, and he was I think a lot of people thought that maybe he'd be the 1st round pick. I think we might be we talked about a little bit before the show. Jahad Campbell could be a 1st round pick. He is playing like a 1st round pick. He's a guy that has had to do just about everything for Alabama, play on the edge, play inside, and everywhere you put him, it's like he's the best player on the field for Alabama. And so, yeah, he's a guy that's always impressed me. And if this is his last game in Bryant-Denny Stadium, which I can't see how it wouldn't be, he really went out on a really positive note. And so, yeah, like between him and Malachi, you got to love their last game in Bryant-Denny Stadium being as good as it was.
I'll add to that with looking at the future as well, especially in the secondary. I mean, the other guy to get a pick in this game was Xavier Brown. I think you got him and Bray Hubbard coming back. Like those are 2 really key pieces.
Too, another guy that can come in. And look, if you think about it, Alabama's secondary is going to be drastically better, I think, next season, because I think that injury to Keon Sabb, you never want anybody to get injured, but the way Keon Sabb was playing, kind of thought he would probably go pro if he continued. He had the makings of someone that could, leave early. Now you look at him, that's probably not going to be the case. So you probably get him for another year back. Bray Hubbard has been I talked a little bit about, Jahad rising above expectations and really taking his game to another level. Who had Bray Hubbard leading Alabama in interceptions on their bingo card to begin the season, and he's somebody that's obviously you're going to be losing something in Malachi Moore, but at the same hand, like the way Bray Hubbard's playing, it's only going to get better. I think they're going to be set between him and Keon Sabb at the safety positions. You've got guys like King Mack, you've got guys like Red Morgan. You mentioned Xavier Brown. We don't know what's going to happen with Damani Jackson, whether he'll go pro. But if he doesn't, I mean, look at this defense. You start having, you've got Jalen Mbakwe. Where's Xavier Mincy going to play? There's a lot of talent. And like you said, it was on display. You had Xavier Brown get a pick. You saw Bray Hubbard get a pick. the future could be bright in the secondary. They still got to fix the defensive line. And, I think they're going to have some reloading that they're going to have to do there. Maybe you got to get some people from the portal. I think you're also going to want more pass rushing. That's, been a problem for Alabama this season. But you look at some of the future in that back end of the defense, and it's definitely something to be excited about.
Yeah, very bright, I would say. No doubt about it. I'll chuck a signing day shout out as well. You got Dijon Lee and Chuck McDonald, two very high end corners coming in and recruiting. So
yeah, I mean, you just kind of got to kind of see, like, what are you gonna, is the money you're gonna get another season of the money, or is he gonna, cash in? I don't know, but fortunately for Alabama, I think they'll be. I mean, you don't want to lose a 5-star talent like that, but I think they'll be fine without him. Obviously, as well, injuries can be a key, and I think Alabama is very deep now at secondary. And the way that they've kind of rotated these guys, you've got a lot of guys that have experience now. I think it's going to pay off. There were some times when that was tough this season. I think it'll pay off next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been rotating them at multiple positions, and guys have been able to show they can play multiple roles. I think that'll help. So yeah, there's a good long-term outlook as well. Tony, before we finish with college football playoff stuff, the Iron Bowl, one of college football's best rivalries, but not one of its most violent yesterday. We had a lot of incidents during rivalry week. I know there was a skirmish on the one sideline that some players were asked about, but we had no, Alabama was at home. We had no flag.
I don't agree with that. I think it was right up there with the violence. There just was no pepper spray, but
there was no flag planting. Is what I was trying to get at.
There was no flag planting. Yeah, but there was plenty of. This was one of your chippier Iron Bowls. I don't know, man. It was. You could tell that. I think Auburn is tired of losing. I think it doesn't usually get to 4 games. It's really been it's been Alabama winning 3 and then Auburn winning 1 and then Alabama winning 3, and that's kind of like what it's been. And now that Alabama won 4 and now 5, I mean, I think you've got Auburn kind of tired of losing. You've got Alabama, probably frustrated coming out of that Oklahoma game. They've got a point to prove, and then you had some trash talk in the middle of it. So, yeah, there was some chippiness, a little bit of extracurricular activities going on. Fortunately, nothing got super out of hand. I mean, I think there's some things that Alabama could have handled better. I also think that Auburn could have also been flagged for some of that too. I think Alabama just needs to worry about Alabama, but at the same time, I don't think it was as one-sided. You only got penalized on one side. I think Auburn played a part in that as well. But there was it definitely means something to people like Malachi Moore, to obviously to people like Devontae Smith. So you want to see some of those guys handle it a little bit better in the moment, but it's a rivalry game. Things get heated. You move on. Fortunately, there was no pepper spray, no
flag planting, no lines of biker cops to separate the two teams.
The cops didn't have to get involved, so that's, I guess, a plus. But
definitely did get a little chippy. I didn't mean to imply that it was a soft game by any stretch, but I compared it to some of the other stuff we saw in rivalry week, and it was a busy one. There was a lot of extracurriculars kicking off, but Alabama does get the win over Auburn, and now the attention turns to what's going to happen. Obviously, the Crimson Tide are not in the SEC championship game. That will be Georgia against Texas on Saturday. So Alabama's waiting until Sunday to see the result of, will they have been the beneficiaries of enough chaos to get into the college football playoff? And Kalen DeBoer was asked about that. A lot of players were asked about that, Tony. And I know you weren't a super big fan of some of the messaging that you heard from DeBoer and the players after the game as to their pitch to the college football playoff committee. I'm just curious your thoughts on what they said and how they interpreted those questions.
It's almost like Alabama was told not to say something. I mean, there's no way. And I get it. Look, before I start, I get it. You're coming off of a win in the Iron Bowl. You're focused. I mean, the Iron Bowl is a big deal. So you're focused on that. And maybe you're not totally thinking about the playoff because you put so much emotion. We mentioned the chippiness. I get where that could be a thing where it's like you haven't really thought about it. But come on, you haven't thought at all about being in the playoff. You haven't looked at these, I mean, we've talked incessantly about like, what does Alabama need? You're telling me that I have a really hard time believing that the players don't also like, they're the ones playing in it. They're the ones that have their actual playoff trip, the thing that they're, only have 4 years to do to make, I mean, that's their careers. There's no way they're not paying attention to those possibilities. I mean, are they letting it take away from their preparation? No, but I have a hard time believing they're not somewhat invested into that. And they were so nonchalant after the game about, their playoff chances, about, Miami losing, kind of, which, gave them a path. I always feel when I say like a path, it reminds me of when they talk about the election and you're like, well, that's the path. They've got to get through, Pennsylvania. It's just like, that's what I think about. But no, but like that Miami loss gave Alabama a path, but nobody seemed to want to talk about it. You even had like Germie Bernard say like, next question. It's like, who are you trying to like impress? The committee's not going to look at Alabama and say, well, hey, they didn't try to beg for it, so we're going to give it to them. They really handled it with class. No, push the issue, man. Like, talk about why you should be a playoff team. Talk about how much harder the SEC is. Really kind of slam that home. Be like, we've look at the players we beat, look at our team, and maybe even bring up the point that, like, honestly, this is something that Nick Saban liked to point out. If it was Miami versus Alabama on paper on a neutral site, who would you take? And I think most people would take Alabama. I think I wanted to hear more of that, more confidence. I think it's not necessarily trash talk; it's just confidence. And I think Alabama just didn't want to concern themselves with the uncontrollables. And I know it's something that gets preached a lot, but there's a little bit of campaigning that goes on, and I don't know how much influence it has, but you got to kind of force the issue, in my opinion, a little bit. And even Kalen DeBoer, who did, provide his playoff pitch, it was a weaker playoff pitch, in my opinion. He said the thing about Alabama winning 5 of its last 6 games. That wasn't even true. They've won 4 of their last 6 games. It was kind of like just this, like, not to say that, it was bad, or I don't even want to call it wishy-washy, but like, and I really hate comparing Kalen to Nick Saban, but I'll do it in this one instance. If Nick Saban's in this in this situation, I swear he has like a 10-point PowerPoint that he's running through after this game, where this is why this, and this. I mean, you saw him, after they lost their second game of the season against LSU a couple of years ago, and he was on every single news station talking about, why his team should get a chance in the playoff. There's still plenty of time for Kalen to campaign and to maybe do that. And, we saw Kalen DeBoer on like 7,000 different podcasts during the offseason. Maybe it's time for him to get on ESPN and really kind of, pound the table for Alabama's chances. Now, you mentioned that Alabama will have to wait until Sunday. Or not really. They're probably going to have to wait until Tuesday to get a good feel of where they stand. Maybe that's when, Kalen will either turn on the jets, or maybe he'll feel a lot more confident. The things you got to look for, I guess, starting on Tuesday, Alabama's got to be 11 or better. If they're 12 or worse, they're out of the playoffs, in my opinion. I don't see Alabama passing an SMU. I think SMU's in the playoff. I think if they lose to Clemson, they're in the playoff, and if they don't. So if Alabama's not already in heading into Tuesday, I don't think they're going to jump anybody. That they're not going to jump a conference title loser that was, I guess, already ahead of them. But if they are 11, I think then there's only a 2-step process to this, Jack. I think the step 2 would be SMU beating Clemson. If Alabama starts at 11 on Tuesday and then SMU beats Clemson in the ACC title game, I think Alabama's in. I think it's as simple as that. Now the question is, it really comes down to, for that 11th spot, really comes down to 3 teams. You've got Alabama, a 9-3 team, has the best wins. You've got South Carolina, also has some really nice wins, but lost to Alabama head-to-head. And you've got Miami, who's 10-2, unlike the other 2-3 teams, but Miami has no wins. That they haven't played a ranked team, and the only I would imagine that's Syracuse will be a ranked team, but they lost. So I mean, I think Syracuse will be a ranked team in the next rankings, but I mean, that's only going to make their loss look a little bit better. But it doesn't give anything to their resume really. So I think, I like Alabama's chances there. I think I actually like the argument to move South Carolina ahead of Alabama more than I do to keep Miami in front of Alabama. Of the two ways Alabama won't make it, I think the one that makes more sense to me would be South Carolina. They're a team that's really hot right now. They just beat Clemson. But on the flip side, I think, when you look at it, in order to move South Carolina that high, you'd have to jump them not only over Alabama, you'd have to jump them over Ole Miss. And those are two teams that South Carolina lost to, on the field this season. That's just going to be tough for the committee, in my opinion, to do. I actually think that we're going to look back if Alabama makes it, and the Egg Bowl is going to be like low key important, because I think it's one thing to ignore one head to head. If South Carolina was right behind Alabama, but having Ole Miss as that little bit of a buffer, it adds that it muddies the water just a little bit more for the committee to say, oh, well, I don't know if I really feel good about, moving them up past two teams that they lost to. So let's just keep them maybe move them ahead of Ole Miss, but not ahead of Alabama, and if you look at it, I mean, I think that the wins are comparable for South Carolina and Alabama. And I think, that Georgia win is going to be big for Alabama. You could argue that one of the other things that you would watch for on Saturday is, I think Alabama would prefer if Georgia won the SEC title now. I mean, it's not going to matter in terms of where they fall. They'll still be below both Georgia or Texas. But if Georgia wins, I think, Alabama can say, hey, wait a minute, we beat the SEC, we beat the SEC champion. That's going to help the resume just that, maybe that little bit more. So, but yeah, you want to see, Kalen kind of make some of those points that I made. He's going to have to battle. I'm sure if I'm Miami, I'm tackling the fact that, and South Carolina, I'm tackling the fact that, that Alabama lost by 25 points to Oklahoma. If I'm especially Miami, because Miami doesn't have that they have, losses, but not, not that blowout loss that Alabama had. And that's what, if I'm Mario Cristobal and I'm trying to make my case, I'm saying, look at that Oklahoma game. Alabama got blown out. They had no chance in that game. We have never had a performance like that. Our losses have come at the last second, one possession games. We never got dismantled the way Alabama did. If Alabama misses the playoff, I think it'll be not because they lost to Oklahoma, because they got blown out by Oklahoma. But like I said, like, you're going to need, I kind of, I'll be just as hard on Mario Cristobal if he doesn't make those arguments for Miami, just like I'm hard on Kalen if he doesn't start trying to beat his chest for Alabama. I think you'll start to maybe see some of that campaigning happen after the playoff ranking. That's when you can kind of maybe you need to make your push. But at the same time, I think Alabama missed the opportunity to do that heading into the playoff rankings. I mean, once those playoff rankings happen on Tuesday, what I don't think, Jack, is I don't think you're going to have Miami be ahead of Alabama on Tuesday and then behind Alabama in the final rankings. That's right. Just, the committee's going to make up their mind in that regard on Tuesday. So really kind of getting mad about it might not matter. I think now is the time where you get in front of things and say, look, don't mess this up, committee. Like, my team deserves to be in it. If I was an Alabama fan, I would certainly want to see my head coach do that. We'll see if he does it over the next couple of days. But that's what my column was about, is just kind of I was kind of surprised how nonchalant Alabama was about the whole ordeal.
Yeah, I think I was disappointed, not surprised at the reaction, because I think I agree with you. I do think there's a little bit of politicking, to bring it back to your analogy at the top. I do think there is, the committee, unlike Alabama, at least on paper, the committee does listen to a lot of that outside noise, I think. And I think there's some things to be considered there. And I know you would put some, and go read Tony's column about it, but he put some quotes from Cam Ward and Mario Cristobal after Miami's loss. They were asked the same thing and did deliver a lot stronger of pitches. And I do think it makes it interesting, but when you do look at the resume on paper, you mentioned kind of the scenarios, and I completely agree with you. I think that is the kind of black and white things that need to happen for Alabama or for things to shake out for Alabama to be in the playoff. You do look at that resume. I think they are overall, when you look at the games itself, politics aside, are in a pretty interesting spot. And I think that also says a lot about the the chaotic nature of this college football season. I mean, man, if you were telling me it was Alabama or South Carolina as that final spot, I mean, I probably
Look,
wouldn't have believed you preseason.
it's not great for my holiday plan, so don't take this as a homer take, because I mean it'd probably be a little bit easier for both of us if Alabama just missed out on this playoff at this point. That being said, I think when you look at the resumes, like I think Alabama has the better of the resumes.
Yeah.
I do. I think
The head-to-head factor is very big. I think you're exactly right. You know, the committee has to evaluate so many things against other things that, you know, are kind of arbitrary. But when you do have that, all right, this team actually played this team on the field, team X won, team X is above team Y. There you go. I think whenever they can have those decisions kind of made for them, those things carry a lot of weight. And Alabama, it was a close one. That was an ugly game, but they beat South Carolina, and that might be proved to be the Tide's most important win of the year, as crazy as that is, in a year where they beat Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge win, and look how close they came to blowing that. Can you imagine?
Yep.
You know, that's something that South Carolina's got to be thinking to themselves, like, man, we're in the playoff if we just win that game. Now, that being said, there's a lot of, you know, if Alabama just doesn't, you know, if Alabama comes out more prepared against Vanderbilt, none of this is happening either, you know. Or
there's quite a few teams and
situations
that
could happen, right? So I mean, like, it's not like Alabama is exempt from those too. But yeah, it's got to be a tough pill to swallow for South Carolina for sure.
That is why we do it. So subscribe to Tide Illustrated. We will have coverage, of course, of where the committee decides to put Alabama on Tuesday, that all important penultimate ranking as we head into championship week. We'll have plenty of coverage as well around National Signing Day this week. It's a huge week, even though Alabama doesn't have a game on Saturday. So head over there and subscribe. We will have a show on Friday. We're going to do maybe, you know, we'll recap signing day. We'll do a little bit more fun stuff too with predictions, pick all the championship games and see what chaos we can cause, you know, with 1 week left and before postseason time, and take a closer look at maybe where Alabama stands after those rankings come out. So we'll have all that Friday, but subscribe to Tide Illustrated. We'll have coverage of signing day all week long, coverage of Alabama, North Carolina on the hardwood in Chapel Hill. Should be a great one in the ACC SEC Challenge. And of course, playoff talk. So plenty to subscribe for on YouTube, plenty to subscribe for on Tide Illustrated. Go do that. We will see you next time.